Hello, welcome to the Wisdom Network. I'm Portland Helmich, and I'm talking today with Barbara Brennan, one of the world's foremost healers and teachers of hands-on healing. She is the founder of the Barbara Brennan School of Healing and the author of Hands of Light and Light Emerging. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
You have devoted more than 25 years to researching and exploring the human energy field, or aura. And for people who are not familiar with those terms, can you give a brief description?
Yeah, the human energy field is the energy, the life energy that surrounds and interpenetrates the physical body. It's directly connected with all aspects of your life, and it's energy consciousness. So every time you have a thought or a feeling, it shows in the field at the moment that you're having that thought or feeling, as well as all life experiences.
It's a field of energy that surrounds our bodies and surrounds every living thing.
Yes, and it also goes all the way through the body. It's wrapped around every cell of the body and all of the organs, and it's directly associated with your life and your health and your illness.
How are you able to perceive this? Mostly visually and through touch, is that right?
I use, yes, mostly vision and touch, and it's vision beyond the normal ranges of vision. And it's something that developed very slowly. I think it's very natural for all human beings. I think when we're born into it, when we're born into this life, we see the field. And then because we're not verified, then we kind of don't notice it anymore. So it's not something that difficult to learn.
And you say that we can all develop this. To me, it seems like, wow, that would be such a gift to see this aura. It's called high sense perception, is that correct?
Yeah, I use that term. It used to be called clairvoyance, clairaudience, and there's always kind of a mystique about that you have to be born with it or you're unusual. And the main point I'm trying to get across is that it's not unusual, it's natural, everyone can do it within about 10 minutes, actually, of trying.
So today I think you'd like to show us just a few exercises to help people start to begin to perceive the field.
Yeah. Can I do that now?
Absolutely.
Okay. So the simplest one to start, and this is an exercise to feel the field. So the simplest one is to simply move your hands back and forth from each other and feel something between your hands. And when I do this with large groups of people, I simply ask them what they feel. And there's always the same kind of responses.
I feel a tingling.
Great. Anything else?
I feel a little bit, I'm a little bit aware because I have done an exercise like this before. I feel a little bit of weight the closer my hands get together and less weight as they come apart.
Now try it a little further apart. See what happens. Can you still feel it?
I'm not the expert that you are, so I can't feel it as intensely the further apart that they get. But
right, that's normal.
I have a vague sense of it. Part of it, I think, is trusting that what I'm feeling is really there.
That's right. That's always important because you need a sounding board of experience. And the more you try this, the more you're going to trust what you're feeling. It's kind of getting used to it.
What are you feeling?
I'm feeling tingling, pressure. I'm also seeing the field between my hands. I'm seeing it build up. So the more I do this, actually, the more pressure I feel when I go in. Notice when you have your hands out here and push them in.
Yes.
You feel it more?
Yes.
It's like an energy ball that grows in the hand.
And I did this exercise with someone once, and he was doing this, and I put my hand through, and I felt something.
Great.
That was exciting.
Another one is to just draw circles on the palm of your hand without touching it. What do you feel?
I feel, again, kind of a light tingling. It's very light.
And where do you feel the tingling? Is it in a shape?
Yeah, it's in the shape of the circle that I'm making.
Great. And the other hand? This is a good one for people to try.
Why so?
Well, because it's the shape. When you draw the shape and feel it, this one you can say, oh, no, I don't really feel anything. But as soon as you're doing this, there's a very specific shape that you feel on your hand that correlates to what your finger movement is.
And it doesn't matter if your eyes are open or closed?
No, you can try it either way because you might be able to feel it easier if your eyes are closed because there's less distraction.
Do you feel the same thing, that tingling?
Yeah. Pressure, tingling. Mostly tingling.
And it takes time to develop this. I mean, if you're brand new at this, you might not feel something right away.
Right.
It requires some practice.
Right. It's a simple thing to practice. You can practice it anytime. Then the best one, at least one of my favorites, is to, and this is a sight exercise, seeing the auric field, is in a darkened room. It's semi-dark. You need to have some lights on. And be sure you don't look into a light, and have a dark background behind your hands. Simply point your fingertips to each other and very gently gaze between your fingertips, but don't focus your eyes. Just allow your eyes to open and something to come in, and simply gaze in a dark light. And then when I do this with audiences, I just ask, what do you see again?
Now, again, we would be doing this with a plain background.
Right.
And I'm looking at your slacks and the chair and the carpet, so it's a little bit different.
It's much harder.
But people start to see colors?
Colors. The first thing people usually do is start naming colors, and then they name a lot of different colors, and then I'll say, well, what is the shape of the colors? And usually they say, well, there's streamers coming from the tips of the fingers, and I'll say, where are they going? And they'll say, they're going between the fingers. Then it's, well, what happens if you move your hands to those streamers? And then people say, well, they bend too, and then they stretch if your hands go further apart.
Now, are there any people who say, I don't feel anything?
Right.
There must be. There must be some, but those are people who still can learn, in your opinion.
Absolutely. And there's two different reasons for that. One is the energy field around the hands is not strong enough. As soon as somebody gets afraid, well, I'm afraid I can't see it, immediately they pull the energy out of their hands. And then another thing is they'll be feeling it, but not believing it. Yes. There's a disconnection.
I think that's me.
Yeah, a little bit.
A little bit.
Yeah.
Interesting. Now, one thing I have to ask you is whether or not you are perceiving this human energy field all the time.
Mostly all the time, but there are different levels. I can on purpose focus and see very specific things, and if somebody asks me a question, I will do that. But usually I try not to snoop, as I call it, because one can get very personal information, one can see inside the body, one can see very specific things in the field, and essentially what's wrong and what's not wrong.
Let's talk a little bit about that. What information can you access from the aura? Health information?
Health information, psychological information, past history information, past history of any part of the body. There's also a kind of vision that I call internal vision, which is actually the same process as remote viewing that's been studied at Stanford Research Institute. But essentially one can look inside the body at tissues. I know that sounds really far out, but if you think about x-rays, x-rays go right through the hand. So we're not using visible light with this, obviously. We're using some other form of light.
So remote viewing, is that a scientific instrument that's measuring the field?
No. Remote viewing experiments were done with a group of people, say in the basement of a research institute, and then a group of people would go out to a site, and then the people in the basement of the research institute would draw pictures of where they were. And at first they did it with psychics, and they were pulling anybody out of the halls to do it, and everybody could do it.
Wow. So are there any scientific instruments that actually measure this field?
Not really. Not the best, well, not completely. There are a few that have picked up some measurements, but the best research that I've seen is done by Valerie Hunt at UCLA. It's actually stored in the UCLA library, called the Rolf Study. She did it quite a while ago. And she had telemetry electrodes all over the body while a healer was working on the body, and another person was reading the auric field. So the person reading the field would say, for example, I see green in the left knee, and now it's moved up to the hip. And at the same time, the electrodes in the body would read the same frequency. And she got very consistency between the frequency measured and the color the aura readers were reading. She repeated it with about 12 aura readers. So it was very good study.
In your book, Hands of Light, you make a really compelling assertion. You say that illness actually begins in the layers of the human energy field before it manifests in the physical body as a symptom or a disease process. Yeah. And when I read that, I thought, wow, that adds whole new meaning to the term preventative medicine.
It's very exciting.
What are the implications in your opinion?
Yeah. Well, very broad, very broad.
If you can catch it in advance.
That's what we're going to do. That's what people that are healers do. That's what people that can perceive the field. And it's not that hard to learn how to do it. One can begin perceiving the different levels of the auric field.
And there are 7?
There are at least 7. It actually goes out further than that. But if you study 7, it's a big study. It's a lot. The field is as complicated as the physical body is. And there are direct correlations between the patterns of the field and health and illness. So there's a health pattern that each of the levels of the field have, and if that pattern is distorted, there's a direct correlation between that distortion, say a rip or a tear in the field, or energy in the wrong place, or not charged enough, a very direct correlation between that distortion and a physical problem.
So you would see a rip or a tear or a hole in the field?
Yes.
Or you might feel that. And that tells you...
I use both, yes.
And what does that tell you? That tells you there's something going on with that particular organ.
Yes. For example, there are 7 centers in the body called chakras. They take in energy and they look like vortexes or funnels. So if, for example, in this area, in the solar plexus area, if this funnel is torn open, then there would be something wrong in this area of the body. And that can get very specific, how it's torn and where, and what illness will come from it.
We'll talk a little bit more about that. We're going to take a break, and we will be back in just a moment. Welcome back. I'm Portland Helmich, and I'm talking today with Barbara Brennan, the author of Hands of Light and Light Emerging. So, Barbara, before the break, we were starting to talk about rips and tears and holes in the energy field and what those might mean.
Yeah. Depending on where it is, certain illnesses are associated with rips and tears, and then there's other illnesses that are associated with stagnation or too much low energy in the field. So in this particular one, I was talking about the 3rd chakra, and if it's torn open, and especially on the left side, we know we're going to have problems in organs on the left side of the body. One particular illness that shows is diabetes, shows as 2 small black vortexes. That's like a little black funnel that shouldn't be there. And with high sense perception, it makes a very high screeching sound.
So this is something you're perceiving auditorily.
Auditorily and watching, looking at it. And of course it can also be felt. Those are the 3 main senses that we use, is touch, seeing, and hearing.
So they'll feel a denseness there?
A person might feel, yes, and feel the chaos in that little those 2 dark vortexes.
So this kind of work can actually be used as a diagnostic tool.
Yeah, I find it very helpful. When I had a practice in New York City for quite a while. Physicians would send their clients to me, the ones that are hard to diagnose. So it's very useful.
Can you contrast for us briefly a healthy field versus an unhealthy one?
Yes, an unhealthy field has several major factors. The field will either be torn open, and sometimes all the way out to the 7th level, like in cancer, and the field will either be stagnating energy, just like mucus in a cold. So if somebody has, for example, pelvic inflammatory disease, will have a lot of dark red energy around the pelvis, and it just sits there and stagnates. So the person would be stagnated in the physical body as well. And whenever I see that, I know that woman's going to either a precursor to pelvic inflammatory disease, or she already has it.
It's amazing that you can predict that in advance.
Yeah, and sometimes a year in advance. So far, I think that was about the furthest one that was diagnosed. The person went and got a diagnosis right away. It was diabetes in this case. He didn't show it, but a year later, his blood showed it. The other thing with illness is incoherency in the field. It will be imbalanced, like there'll be more energy on one side than the other. Certain levels will have energy, others won't. In a healthy field, there's a very balanced field. First, the field, I need to describe that the field has either structured levels or it has fluid energy that flows along those structured lines.
And one level is structured and the next is fluid.
Yes, it's every other level, right. Yes. So when the structured levels get torn, then the fluid will pour out in a sense. And that happens with cancer. That's why cancer people, or people that have cancer, excuse me, people that have cancer will lose energy and be very tired. In addition, of course, to the physiological problems, there's also an aura leak. So healers then work to restructure the field.
Let's move into that. So if someone is ill, or it looks in his or her field like they could become ill, what could someone who's trained to do this kind of work actually do about it?
The first thing we would do is charge and balance the field, and then we would work very, very specifically to restructure the parts of the field that are not. For example, I mentioned the chakra that's torn open. We can, with our own energy, learn how to restructure that chakra, put it back in place, and essentially charge the field. Then the individual has the experience of feeling well again. And that's very important to remember wellness. And then we do that about once a week. Of course, in serious illnesses, we work with physicians.
So when you say we're going to charge the field, we're going to repair the field, so healers are just bringing their own intuitive guidance through them and out through their hands and remodeling the field?
In a way, that's right. We train healers to first regulate their own field and their own energy so that it can be very specific. So I can control the lines of energy coming out of my hands. I know exactly what's going on because I can perceive it first, which is why high sense perception is so important. So in other words, we can see what we're doing while we're doing it. And that's very important. So yes, we can restructure the whole field, not so much just with the mind, but with our actual energy field. So healing training includes regulation of your own field, being able to strengthen it so that you have enough energy to help people. And also, of course, take it in. It's channeling. It's bringing it in while we're putting it out, so to speak.
That reminds me of that idea that you can't really take care of others unless you can take care of yourself.
Absolutely. Every healer must take care of himself.
So I'm interested in what the client feels on the table. The work is often called the laying on of hands, but very often clients are not even touching the bodies of the individuals they're working on. What do people feel?
Right. Many people will feel the energy right away. I know I've had people on the table that thought I had the table wired somehow. And we do work both hands-on and off, depending on what's needed in the moment. But people will feel heat. They'll feel the tingling. Usually, as the healing progresses, because we're working with consciousness and energy, the person will go through a psychological process of sometimes experiencing the energy consciousness in the stagnated energies as we bring them out. And so somebody might feel childhood pain or the pain of when the illness happened, if it was some kind of an accident or something like that. They might relive it to a certain extent. And then as the healing progresses and the field gets clearer and restructured and balanced, the person feels more and more better. They actually usually ending in ecstasy.
Now, if someone isn't feeling anything when they're being worked on, does that mean that they are not receiving any healing?
Not at all. Actually, I haven't worked on
anyone that didn't
feel it, but or anybody that says I'm not going to feel this ends up feeling it. But yes, the person does not have to believe in it. They do not have to feel it. It still works.
It seems on the surface that the client's pretty passive. He or she is just lying there on the table receiving this work. But I'd guess that you don't see clients as passive at all. I'm wondering how you think this kind of work demands that clients take responsibility for their own healing.
Every moment of the healing, the healer is only following the energy field of the client. So whatever that client allows happens. And as the client surrenders deeper and deeper, then more occurs. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean consciously allows. It is the entire energy system. So the person is going through a deep process, even if they're maybe possibly not even conscious aware. They might be in an altered state of consciousness or even thinking they're asleep or experiencing sleep. However, the changes in the field cause not only changes within the physical body and the auric structure, but also in the individual's life. So all of that is a decision before even getting on the table, and then the decision deepens how much change that person can have.
And how much they're ready for.
And how much they're ready for, and it's extremely important to honor that.
As a healer.
Yes.
Not
Yes.
to push the envelope too far.
Absolutely. Never push the envelope, go with the healing. We follow the client's energy field.
I know that you don't advocate that people who are involved in this kind of spiritual healing completely abandon conventional medicine.
Absolutely not.
You really think that if a person is ill, they need to be seeing a conventional doctor, and this is an adjunct, a supplement.
Yes, the doctor of their choice. It may not. Some people may not call a doctor of osteopathy or naturopathy or Oriental medicine a conventional doctor. So it depends. And also, I would say that depends on the illness. There are certain illnesses that essentially I would send clients home to say, get a doctor, then we can work together, because it's very important.
Why is it so important?
Because I have had many people come and want me to give them healings to create some kind of miracle so they don't have to go through the process of healing. And there's a lot of denial that has happened. I've seen people that were in pretty bad shape. They were in denial and saying things like their cat is going to heal them. And that was probably the furthest person in denial that I saw. But it's always very important to work with a physician. I work with cancer clients who were in chemotherapy and radiation. I found it a very good way to work with physicians, because the person would get their chemo and come right to the healing, and then I would clear out the auric field, would be quite dark in the liver and the arm where the chemo was put in, and clear it out. It decreases the side effects tremendously. And the same with radiation. Radiation tends to burn the structure levels of the field, so the person comes in right after radiation and we restructure the field. Lot more decrease in side effects. And sometimes 10 years later, I worked on people, a person who had Hodgkin's, and she had some damage in her nerves in her arm. She could not lift her arm. And this was 10 years later. She came for treatments, and we were able to restructure the field so she could move her arm again.
That is fascinating. I have enjoyed talking to you so much today. I wish we had more time, but unfortunately we don't.
It's been a lot of fun.
Thank you.